Bienvenidos a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar de San Mateo-Foster City. Tenemos un intérprete para los participantes que necesitan traducción al español. Para escuchar la junta en español, presione el icono del mundo en su pantalla. Muchas gracias.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to roll call. Trustee Brooks?
Here.
Trustee Kim?
Here.
Trustee Trin?
Here.
And I am also here. Moving on to item 2C, approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks for the motion and Trustee Kim for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was 4 yeses. Moving on to item 2D, approval of the minutes from our August 29th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from August 29th meeting.
Can I say something about that? So I don't, I think we've adjusted our meeting dates. So originally it was October 10th, and now it's October 3rd. But at some point I saw something that said October 13th. So I just want to make sure that like all the website is accurate. So other than that, I will second.
Okay. So maybe we can, I guess, note that, but all in favor, please. Actually, let me just, for the record, Trustee Brooks for the motion and Trustee Trin for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3A, public statements related to non-agenda topics. The San Mateo-Foster City School Board cannot act upon any matter that has not been included and publicly posted on the agenda, except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. The board may refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Please limit your statements to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here that would like to make a public comment on non-agenda topics? No? Okay, how about Zoom?
Checking. No public comments at this time.
Thank you. Item 3B is public statements related to agenda items. Persons will be called on at the appropriate time. We can now move on to item 3C, Foundation Committee PTA Council reports.
I have one from the Education Foundation. Colleen couldn't be here today, so she wanted to share the following from the Ed Foundation. The Ed Foundation will be kicking off our annual campaign after fall break. We wanted to make sure that we gave PTAs time to focus on their fundraising efforts and membership drives. We are fundraising to provide essential staff support, enabling enriching out-of-classroom experiences for all pre-K through 8th grade students.
Thank you. Any other reports?
Sure, good evening. I would like to report Trustee Kim and I attendance at the Housing Task Force today, which was really productive, informational, and it's moving full steam ahead. So we're really excited about the faculty housing project that we expect to come in the near future.
Great, thank you. Do we have anyone from PTA Council that would like to make a report? Teachers. Joe, is there anyone online raising their hand for this one? I'm guessing not, so let's move on.
Nothing?
It's just crickets. Okay, 3D is SMETA, CSEA, SMFCAA updates. Yes, Kathy. Thank you.
I'm assuming this is good to go.
There might be a little green ring around.
There's a green, so is that good? Green means go? All right. Well, good evening, everyone, board members and members of the public. Now, as president of SMETA, I get the privilege of leading our governing council. And governing council, in case you don't know, is a body of about 40 diverse members. There are leaders at each of the 21 sites. And we meet monthly to discuss issues and share information and make decisions. Well, we met yesterday, and in addition to our regular orders of business, we took some time to collectively brainstorm a list of our values and a list of some of our hopes and wishes for 2024-2025. And there was some overarching trends from the list that we came up with, and I'd like to share some of those with you during our update tonight. So we'll start with values and how they go in with our hopes. So one of our big values of governing council holds is collaboration and shared decision-making. We know that the best decisions come when a diverse group of stakeholders and people from different opinions come together and share a conversation and have an equitable input. Those decisions come through comes through consensus and input, and it's not just an afterthought or a checkbox. This value comes to light when you look at a few of the hopes and wishes that our reps came up with this year. We hope for meaningful avenues of teacher input before decisions are made. And that is happening in some places now. Our middle school teachers are about to give input on the block schedule and its impact through a series of meetings. And our TKK folks are going to have some meaningful conversation about how it's going to look like to extend their day in the coming year. This also needs to happen in other areas though too. For example, elementary teachers have not piloted a new curriculum since before the pandemic. And yet we've received several new programs since then that we've had to implement without any teacher input. We look forward to the days when we can pilot curricula again that will best serve all of our students. And of course, we can't talk about collaboration and shared decision-making without addressing community schools. Another hope that was listed on our list is that the district is going to honor community schools model that lets the site steering committees make the final decisions of how community school grant money affects their populations, their individual schools. Instead of being told that grant money has already been used or actually it has been allocated for them. Another value that our governing council holds is transparency. Especially transparent communication. People really do want to know what's going on in the district, but not just what's going on, but the rationale behind decisions that are being made. Transparency also means that people are not only allowed to use, but are encouraged to use open and honest communication. The truth can and should be allowed to be told, even when it's not in a shiny, bright Canva package. One of our wishes expressed this year is that students and staff can get appropriate support. For instance, support in the form of resources, trained staff that's needed, even smaller class sizes. The reality is that often when needs are brought up, they're often either quickly explained away or told us that we're not really needed, or even asked, what are you doing to cause that thing to happen? Transparent communication tells the why behind the no, but also values the honesty and the conversation and communication that goes behind decisions that are made. And a final value that our governing council holds is respect. Respect for our daily commitment to our students and families, respect for our knowledge and experience as educators, and respect for our time. Many of us are fortunate to work at sites where our expertise and our daily experience is valued. We get a chance to work together really well for the best of our students. We advocate for time and things that we need that's going to serve our communities. But one repeated wish is for that type of feeling to extend district-wide. This is often seen as respect for our time, just for one example, especially when it comes to staff development. The desire for meaning and engaging professional development is real. Not just that we feel welcome in a room, but that the PD that we're getting is reflective of things that we need or things that can benefit our day-to-day experience. We are educators, so you can pretty much trust that educators, we know what needs we need and the methods that will best educate us. We just need to be asked. SMETA Governing Council may only be about 35, 40 members, but we represent approximately 580-ish members throughout the district. And you can guarantee that everything that we do is for the best of our students and families and has their well-being in mind. SMETA is going to operate under those shared values this year. Effective change really only operates under the speed of trust. And SMETA's governing council members and the people that we represent are very open to strengthening the trust and collaboration throughout the district, because that's what's good for kids. Our students are depending on all of us to help make this work. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your brainstorming session. We will move on to, is CSEA here? Anyone from CSEA? Joe?
She's online.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Are you guys able to hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry. Thank you for that. Good evening, trustees and Superintendent Ochoa and all present. For those who are here with us tonight who are not familiar, my name's Breanne Bishop. I am the secretary for the CSEA Chapter 411, which is serving the union, our union that serves our classified staff members of our district. We are all excited about the new school year after many of our members enjoyed a hard-earned, well-deserved summer break. So far, the new school year seems to be off to a great start, and we hope all of you were able to enjoy some solid rest and relaxation as well. I can't recall if we reported this at the last meeting, so just in case not, we were pleased that all of our members ratified the successor contract for the 24-25 school year. And that included a classified salary schedule increase in an effort to keep up with the rising cost of living. We also took care of some paraeducator 2 staff in this to bring them up to a very competitive wage, some of the toughest classified positions in the district. And so we were thrilled about all of that. Unfortunately, there is another group who began their application for job description update and reclassification that started almost a year ago, and that group is still waiting. The project was stalled for a good portion of the year, but the last few months of last school year, there was some tremendous progress, and our negotiating team was really pleased with how things were going. So picking up where things left off over the summer, after the summer, we're hoping that by the next board meeting, we will have something, some positive news to share with you and something for you all to review at that time. So that is all we've got from Chapter 411 of the CSEA at this time. And we are grateful as always for this time you've given us.
Thank you so much for the update. We can move on to SMFCAA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Good evening, board, school board, Superintendent Ochoa, our district staff, and guests. I'm Lori Fukumoto, principal at North Shoreview, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here at the board tonight to give you an update on what's going on at our school. The first thing I really want to acknowledge Deputy Superintendent Gaffney and Amy for really focusing on our school and making it a beautiful place. So on those hot days, we have a beautiful HVAC system to keep us nice and cool. We just got new flooring over the summer. And then on top of that, to kind of help with noise and students working on the floor, we have brand new area rugs. And then to also update some of our classrooms that had 25-year-old shelves, we got some new shelving. So our school looks absolutely beautiful. Inside and then outside too, with our new turf and our new field. It finally got finished over a course of 2 years. So we're really excited about how our school looks on the outside. And then on the inside, I have to say, thanks to Superintendent Ochoa and Deputy Superintendent Gaffney and Assistant Superintendent Chambliss, we now have 24 TK students and 36 kindergarten students learning together in a classroom or in classrooms. So we have 3 TKK classrooms for the first time. So we're thrilled. We're really excited about that. And on top of that, they got some refurbished classrooms. So beautiful, beautiful rooms, and we're excited to have our youngest learners in those rooms. And then on top of that too, I'm trying to give lots of praise to lots of people. So Assistant Superintendent Chambliss, he worked with us. We were without a math TOSA for a year. And so he worked with us and we found a math Montessori TOSA part-time, but we are excited and thrilled to have her on board. She's supporting our, currently she's supporting our classified paras to learn more about Montessori. So, and then she's going to be working with our certificated staff as well. So very exciting things happening at North Shoreview. And then for students, we're right in the middle of something called Universal and Historical Timeline. So in lieu of Halloween, we do a special event on the 31st where students are studying either something in history or somebody in history. And so they're starting that study now. And then when they come back after October break, they'll kind of hit it hard and do some research on a person or a thing that they've studied. And then in culmination on the 31st, they'll either dress up as that person or thing, or they'll be able to talk about that in a big presentation that we do. And all the students line up historically or in a timeline fashion. So if you're around North Shoreview on the 31st, we invite you to come over and take a look at what's going on. It's really exciting. And then in February, I can't wait to have you, the board, come for your annual visit. So thank you so much for everything. The amazing support from the district is just unbeatable. So thank you so much.
Good evening, Cindy Chin, principal at Sunnybray. Wanted to just highlight a few different things that are happening around campus right now. Last week, as part of the community schools, we began hosting parent workshops. And we hosted a Spanish workshop and then an English workshop the next night with PK. It's the Parents Institute for Quality Education. And so they'll have a series of workshops for our families. At the first session for our Spanish-speaking families, we had over 100 families there. And for the English-speaking, it was about 40 families. And so for the next couple of months, we'll be having those workshops on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And then this week, we began using our ELOP academic intervention funds to target our 4th and 5th grade students who are either at risk or already designated as long-term English learners, and really trying to focus on them to boost their language level. And then finally, next week, we'll host the first principal professional learning community at our site for a small group of principals and district office staff. And we'll walk through the school and see a few classes. Okay.
Thank you so much for the updates. Okay, moving on to 3E announcements. I had one. No, I thought yours was right in the right place, but if you want to go again, you can go again, if you have more to say. I was going to just share an event that's happening in Foster City this weekend on Saturday. There's a former Bowditch student who's working towards some sort of distinction in Girl Scouts. I'll have to look up more about that, but it's a menstrual health event for fourth graders and above. It's at Foster City Elementary School on Saturday at 1:30. There's an RSVP link. Is she working? Did she work through? Okay, through the health department. Okay, so health group. So anyways, there's for fourth graders and up, they're going to talk about finding the right products, dealing with cramps, what to eat, just all kind of how to track and everything like that. So it seems like a really great event that this student, former student, now a high school student, is putting on. So just wanted to share that.
That's very impressive. I would not have been caught dead discussing such matters in high school. So I am like just blown away and super impressed. I wanted to, as probably all of you know, there is an election coming up in early November. I just want to encourage everyone who, who is not already paying attention to the election to read up about it. We have so many important laws and candidates on the ballot, both in San Mateo and Foster City. I know San Mateo and Foster City both have city council elections. There's a lot of statewide ballot propositions and local measures as well that are really important and can affect things like housing, for example. So I just want to encourage everyone to get involved. There's many ways to get involved other than just voting. You can donate, you can, flyer, talk to voters, that sort of thing. So, and that's something that I think anyone can do. And so just wanted to say, get out there and do your research.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay. We will go on to 3F Superintendent Report.
Thank you, President Proctor. I'll start with community schools, and specifically Sunnybrae as an example. We're very fortunate in a district that has been so public and has been so forward about why we're pursuing community schools and what we hope to achieve with our community schools. And one of the key goals for every community school in the district is really parent empowerment. So as a result of the really significant community marketing, community discussions, and the many meetings we held over the last 2 years related to community schools, we got a call from the Hispanic Foundation of the Silicon Valley. And this is an organization that raises funds to pursue a variety of different goals, mostly related to uplifting the Hispanic community. And these folks called us over summer and said, "Hey, we read about your community schools. We'd love to, to discuss this possibility with you." And the possibility was to bring on the Parent Institute for Quality Education, which in the state of California, it's one of the gold star programs for parent education. So the foundation is actually covering a pretty significant portion of the cost. And so the collaboration with our principals and with our CSS staff and with those site steering committees is essential because so often service providers come to the district as a result of the many different connections we have with nonprofits and with service providers. So something that we're working on now is establishing a menu of different services that our community schools and their steering committees will be able to deliberate over the next few months to think about what services to bring on to their campus and how to utilize those funds. To what extent one program for students has a benefit over another. So at Sunnybrae, for example, and really actually all the community schools to some extent wrote into their plans a real desire to have students more active, students more physically active. And so the day before yesterday, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rubalcaba and I met with AYSO, who has an interest in operating a San Mateo-Foster City School District soccer league explicitly at those schools and perhaps a few others. So that would be an example where we wouldn't want 5 different community schools to have to go through and try to arrange something like that, but rather spell out what that might look like and then meet with the schools and offer that service and potentially put something together that really integrates across campuses. And actually PICA is in place at our other community schools as well. So this is definitely step one for PICA. To hear that we had 140 parents just checks all the boxes for me. And I can imagine a circumstance where we continue to find more vendors down the road who come in and do more and more advanced training. We were in a meeting just the other day with a parent who told us about an experience she had in another district where she was trained to be a parent mental health ambassador. So then a lot of our bells started going off thinking it really would be important for our parents to understand mental health, the importance of mental health services to kids, knowing that for many of our communities, mental health has a stigma that's attached to it. And that stigma can really interfere with kids having their needs be met. So certainly a lot to look forward to, and many thanks to Cindy and to her colleagues at our community schools who are already putting the work in to facilitate these programs. I do want to also thank Lori. Lori, you're just very important to North Shoreview Montessori, but also you get to work at a really special school. You know, a school that comes out and says, we want to think of every student as a learner, to give every child dignity, to treat them as a partner. That's a really, really high goal, to say that we want to inculcate in students a responsible sense of freedom on campus. And I see it when I come to the campus. And yes, your campus also looks beautiful, but I think what happens in between the bells at that school it's just really special. So thank you and all your staff. The teachers at your school and the staff at your school are really extraordinary people. And to know that our youngest learners are already involved in that Montessori model where it's multiple grade levels in one class and we're not segregating them based on having birthdays 12 weeks apart, that's just really fantastic. So thank you for that. I do want to talk about our Educator Housing Task Force. We held it in this very room. So to Lakini and to everybody else who helped turn this boardroom back into a meeting room, it was an important day because we were able to bring on an expert in educator housing. She's a legal counselor for Lozano Smith. She spoke for 2 hours, but really it just felt like 15 minutes. A couple of folks up here, I'm checking to see how much you're smiling, but it didn't seem like that long of a presentation because we had so many questions to ask. But she took us through, some pretty high level legal, statutory discussions about how educator housing has changed over the last 15 years. And an important law that was just passed, well, actually it was passed 2 years ago, but it was just put into effect in January of 2024. And that's Assembly Bill 2295. The outcome of that meeting was that sense and that awareness of, what the playing field is, what rules are in place. But it did lead us into a more thorough conversation about our friends just up 101 at Jefferson Union High School District. We were able to speak with their district staff, and they shared with us their presentation. As some of you may know, the Jefferson Union High School District opened school this year with every staff position filled. And they attribute this culture of people staying to work there with the 100 units that they built on a 3-acre property in Jefferson. That's a combination of about 50 one-bedroom homes, about 35 two-bedroom homes and 7 three-bedroom homes that rent for $1,400 and some odd dollars for the one-bedroom, $1,700 and some odd for the two-bedroom, and some of your eyes are getting real big out there, and $2,200 for the three-bedroom, which if you just look on the internet, you cannot find a three-bedroom for less than $4,000 at a minimum. And that's if you're lucky and they like you and you're related to the person who's renting it. And your family gets along. So it really got engaging that last hour. I mean, we listened a lot the first couple hours, but that last hour, so many ideas being shared. We had multiple elected officials from the city of Foster City, the city of San Mateo, the county of San Mateo. We had our former trustee and current supervisor, Noelia Corzo, was with us today. But really felt that sense of movement and energy. And we talked about our upcoming meeting in October, which will also take place on the same day as our school board meeting. And each one of these is scheduled for the same day as our school board meeting. And at that meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to go into a much deeper analysis into 2 district properties. One of them we're all sitting at right now, 1170 Chess Drive. This physical facility and this land is an asset that the district should be thinking about. But also we own a property just past 42nd and Alameda, and that's the Knowles Elementary School. And that's another property for us to be thinking about as an asset. So what we'll do in preparation of the next task force meeting is have a very thorough analysis into those 2 properties specifically. We'll also bring one of the Jefferson Union High School District trustees to our next meeting to answer questions from the group. And we're reaching out to Santa Cruz City Elementary School District, as well as Mountain View Wisman and the San Mateo Community College District to invite them to come and tell us their story so we can take the best ideas from every single entity and figure out what really works as a potential path in the San Mateo Foster City School District. That rigorous discussion, that engagement, we know is just the second step in a long process. But we're looking forward to that school board meeting in February where this task force will give written recommendations to the board here. They'll be standing right up front, talking to this board about recommendations they have for actions that they would support this school board taking in the future. So definitely a lot to be excited about and a lot to report. And that's my report for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. We'll now go on to item 4, which is the proposed consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items be removed and discussed from the consent agenda. The superintendent and staff recommend approval of all consent items. Movement of any recommended consent item is appropriate at this time. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull?
I would like to pull 4A6.
Anyone else? Okay, are there any items that the audience would like to pull? Okay, Joe, can we check on Zoom?
Checking. No raised hands at this time.
Okay, I always get this mixed up. Yeah, let's do that first.
I'll make a motion to pull, to approve the agenda, pulling item A6.
4A6.
4A6, excuse me, 4A6, and approving the remainder of the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks, for the motion, and Trustee Trin for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved with 4 yeses. We can go to item 4A6.
I pulled this item just because I don't totally understand the GAN limit situation or like what the consequences are. If I could get a little more context, that would be
Thanks, Maggie. So I think, I'm not sure, I forwarded you just a link on the CD webpage that explains it in detail, and there's variations of that too, so I can summarize for you pretty quickly by reading through it, but I'm happy to, and Blanca can share with us kind of the exercises we go through and looking at the property taxes that are generated and what the GAN limit's intended to do in terms of what taxes are generated, what those taxes are spent on. And each year you go through an exercise because there's an estimation amount and then there's a final amount. And then there's a reconciliation between those two relative to the limit. And the limit kind of fluctuates too because there's an anticipated growth also in the tax base. So annually what you have to do is you have to go back and look at the actual taxes generated relative to the estimated taxes that are generated. And we get our estimated taxes from the tax assessors themselves too, who have tools in place to anticipate what those values are. And again, this is all relative to a larger funding structure for education, but also goes back to Jarvis GAN back in Prop 13 when Prop 13 was put into place. And that was kind of the intent behind that was to kind of regulate and govern the amount of taxes that are generated. So prior to Prop 13, districts and entities had the ability to generate taxes and tax their constituents. The GAN limit was put in place with an intention to govern that and limit that, right? And Gene may be able to speak to that more articulately than me too, with his background too, from working with the legislature for years. So that Jarvis GAN and the GAN limit goes back to affiliation with Prop 13. And then annually, like I say, we go through this exercise of trying to anticipate what taxes we have generated for our district, and then a reflection of what the actual taxes that are generated, and we do a restatement of those taxes. So that's kind of a high-level 20,000-foot view for you, Mag, if that helps. And again, there are people who do hour-long presentations on the GAN limit. Gene's shaking his head.
Thank you for sparing us the hour-long presentation.
Does that help, Maggie, kind of put it in context?
It does help a little bit. I'm sorry, I don't see the email, but I guess my main question is like, if we exceed, if we're making this declaration that we're exceeding the limit, like in your experience, are we opening ourselves up to like some legal consequences, or is it just like this is the number?
I think that just my experience, I've not seen a direct impact to a district, and I've been with basic aid districts for this is my 26th year. I've not seen a negative impact. I think if there was a substantial fluctuation, but our numbers, the tax assessors work for years, they're fairly good at what they do. So I haven't seen a wild fluctuation that might trip us into a significant consequence.
Okay.
And in the link, I'll share it with you again. I gave it to Diego P. And so I thought that was forwarded on to you. So we'll follow up on that. But it explains what some of those consequences are, but it had to be pretty substantial. So I'm not too worried about it if that's an easier answer for you.
Okay. That's what I was getting at. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item? Anyone on Zoom, Joe?
Checking. No raised hands at this time.
Any further discussion? Okay, then we're ready for 4A6.
Motion to approve 4A6.
Thank you, Trustee Trin for the motion and Trustee Kim for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was 4 yeses. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, moving on to item 5A, approval of the 2023-2024 unaudited actuals.
Thanks, everybody. I'll just put my slide deck up here in just a moment. First, I wanted to thank Blanca, as usual, and the whole team for putting together all this information for us. It's a tremendous amount of work. So Blanca's online with us too tonight. So if there's specific questions for you, anticipating what a lot of questions are from you and from the community, we tried to consolidate this and provide you a narrative in the booklet and for the public as well too, that ultimately really explains some of the variances between what our estimated actuals are and our unaudited actuals. And so the narrative goes through, and rather than reading through all the pages here too, it's summarized for you where those variances are. And again, Blanca and the HR team and a lot of folks do this tremendous job of managing our budget. Just as an example, I'm looking at the top of this page 10 that shows actual certificate salaries were approximately 99% of the estimated actuals. And classified salaries in the 98% range. And it explains to you why some of those variances occurred just on the classified side. There were some positions that were posted that had been filled between when we had generated the estimated amount and the final amount. So this goes through for you and explains at a high level the variances. And we look at both the unrestricted side of the budget and the restricted side of the budget. And where we saw some fluctuation too were in the books and supplies categories and services and other operating expenditure categories. Again, from a statistical perspective, these numbers are not substantial, but what this has done for us ultimately, and I'll share this quick slide with you here, and it's in your slide deck as well too. This is the, let me go to slideshow. It'll take up the whole. Here we are. It's saying document recovery. That's not good. Well, let me try this again. Sorry. Ultimately, what it's doing is it's increasing our ending balance on the unrestricted side and on the restricted side. On the unrestricted side, it's a total of $7 million that gets added to our ending balance, and on the restricted side, it's an increase of $6 million. Again, associated with some of those fluctuations in the books and supplies category primarily, and the services and other operating expenditures. So what we'll do with this overall value is when we do our first interim budget, which is the next cycle we'll go through, we'll adjust our budget for the current year, 24-25, by adding in these additional amounts into our 24-25 budget. Okay, so that's kind of a long story short, what the impact is to us, and when we'll do those adjustments. In your slide deck as well too, it shows you where we're at in the overall cycle. It walks you through, and I'm sorry that I'm not sure why I'm not able to show a total screen here, but again, it shows you where we're at in the cycle, our unaudited actuals. Our auditors are coming in October to go through that and validate that for you, and these slides kind of break down for you too. General fund closing at a glance. It shows you total revenues and expenditures, what happens to our ending fund balance. And I explain what those variances are and the dollar amounts and what the primary reasons are behind that. We walk through, again, shows you the different sources for the general fund revenues. We walk through for you on the general fund expenses and the different categories, right? And what those totals are. And this shows you general fund unrestricted balance as of June 30th and what that's comprised of. And that's also inclusive of that variance, which we talked about $7 million, and that gets added. And where we captured that was in what we carry in your ending fund balance relative to your payroll value that's there. Okay, our goal has been to maintain kind of this 1 month payroll as a balance, also in addition to your stabilization arrangements and your economic uncertainty reserve. Okay, so that's where we put that value. This slide also, and this kind of corresponds with what's in your narrative. We've shown the estimated actuals and the unaudited actuals and the variances for both the unrestricted and the restricted side, and the narrative captures what those variances are associated with. Okay. Oops, I'm so sorry that my laptop's been not showing this in a full screen. This slide also just again shows you high-level narrative of what the variances are associated with. And then we walk into some of the other funds other than the general fund, what the beginning balance and revenues and expenditures were, and what the ending balances are for each of these different funds.
Patrick?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, there's a little button at the bottom right corner. I think if you press it, it'll do the presentation to the left a little bit.
Slideshow.
It did, okay.
Okay, close. This one here?
Yeah, that one. All right,
Steve, show me.
maybe, I think it's
Joe.
mad at you, sorry.
I kind of walked through it, so. Stop share. Go back to share screen and PowerPoint. I went to slideshow.
Well, Patrick is working on his tech. if you go up and down the peninsula at either this school board meeting or the one just prior, school districts are presenting on the same report. And what you'll find with experienced teams such as the one we have here with Blanca and Joanne and some of these other folks that have been at this a long time along with Patrick is you really want that report of your unaudited actuals to be as close as possible on the expenses side to your estimated actuals. One of the things that makes that hard, which is why for me it's such an achievement to have a team that can put together reports and really keep their eye on the ball, is that while they're doing their estimated actuals, they're also building your next budget. So they got the equivalent of 2 finals they're doing all at the same time. And they have to present both publicly, and they need to get one approved that's based on their best guess on the other. So it's difficult work. And so the slide that you just saw last really spells out specific categorical spending, the cafeteria fund, the deferred maintenance fund, and each one of those in the long report, which is also online. Some of us who like to read those are 140-page documents, but they're really wonderful. It's really great to go back because you can look at last year's and the year before last and the year before last, and what you'll see for us is consistency. There's a real consistency in that reporting. And when districts stray from that, that's where you start to find districts saying we need to cut spending by X dollar amount because they're surprised at what's going on in their budget. And for us, I think we're more looking forward into what we might be able to do in the next fiscal cycle. And we'll find out soon if the technology is cooperating with Patrick. It is. Yay.
Finally. Any questions on any of that information? Is this an action item? So you're acting on adopting the unaudited actuals.
Any questions? Go for it.
Thanks, Patrick. 2 quick questions on slide number 6. So I wanted to ask the non-spendable line item. Can you just clarify what typically falls under that?
I'm going to slide 6 so everyone can see. Bear with me, Gene. Blanca, do you want to take this $45,000 line item, the non-spendable on the unaudited actuals?
Yes. Good evening, Board of Trustees and public. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So the 45,000 non-spendable, that's actually all our revolving account. We do have a revolving account with First Bank, and that's for emergency cases. One example of that is, let's say, for example, an employee didn't receive their paycheck, and we need to issue a paper check right away. So that non-spendable revolving account is used for those emergencies.
Good.
And in smaller school districts, the amount goes down. So it's just the kind of protection you need for those truly unanticipated but essential immediate expenses you have to put together.
And my second question was related to that because I see the reserve for economic uncertainties is indexed at 3%. Just wanted to confirm, is that kind of the standard that we have here in California, or where did that specific designation come from?
So the 3% designation is something that all districts in California are required to have. This district and this board has had a policy for some time to maintain a 6% reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And as a basic aid district, it's very, very common for basic aid districts with support of a lot of organizations because of volatility in property taxes to have a reserve in excess of that. And so that's some of the history too of what we have here too in this 1-month payroll value that's there also too. So it's not uncommon for basic aid districts across the state to have a reserve certainly in excess of 6%. Does that answer your question, Gene?
So I guess in our district, is our policy to keep that reserve around 6%?
At a minimum.
At a minimum.
And I mean, our practice has been to have it in excess of that.
That's great.
But you see there's 3%.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
And then my last question was, I think it's on slide 9. For the funds that we have set out here, I just want to confirm if I'm reading this correctly. Is I guess the idea that these will all at some point zero out, or do any of these, I guess, renew?
If you want to talk through one by one, Gene, I mean, we can talk about that. I mean,
Some of them seem like they would zero out, so I wasn't clear if that was the case for all of them.
No, some of them will be maintained. I mean, they won't zero out. Your retiree benefits is not going to zero out, as an example. We have plans to spend values that are in here, our deferred maintenance, there's planning associated with that, but that's something you replenish, so that will never actually be 100% depleted. Your building fund, I mean, we're spending that down really aggressively. So that will be something that zeroes out. Your Fund 25, you're required to spend those funds down over a period of time. Again, this is what you're generating in the form of developer fees, and you have 3 years to spend those fees. You need to plan for that. So it doesn't zero out completely. Conceptually, if you had no development, it might, but I don't anticipate seeing that. Our Fund 40 is a reserve. We've had different discussions about what to use those funds for. It's a capital reserve, and there's a history of how those funds were generated, and these are committed to capital projects. We've used that for a variety of different things over the years. And, I remind people, too, that when we passed our last bond, prior to passing the bond, we had done a study that suggested we had needs in the district, about $1.2 billion in needs, and we passed a $400 million bond. So Fund 40, although there's a value in there of $16 million, there's tremendous need in the district. So there's plans associated with those funds too. Bond interest and redemption fund, I mean, I'm not sure I need to speak about that. That's interest that's generated, yeah. The other enterprise, Fund 63, this is a little bit misleading in the sense that this is really an accounting value that shows it as a negative amount. This is associated with a GASB reporting requirement, and that would take me a while to explain that, Gene, so I'm happy to send you a summary about that.
We take that
And then retiree benefits we talked about. The foundation private trust value of Fund 73, there's some opportunity for us to spend those dollars down. That's something we haven't spent a tremendous amount of time on, just as we're managing that kind of $500 million bond program, but these are some dollars that are still available to us. So that's a quick 2-minute recap for you, answering your question.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, any public comment on this? How about on Zoom?
Checking. No public comments at this time.
Okay, any board comments? Well, I have a comment. Thank you for all the work that you did on this. I remember when we originally looked at the estimated actuals in the budget, and we were like, what do you mean there's a $21 million loss that's going to happen? And you said, don't worry, we wait for the rollovers and all that stuff. So it's nice to see that it panned out how you said it would. And I'm thrilled to see that there's 1 month of payroll that's actually set aside in the reserves, because that's something that I always think about, that, if something happened, at least that we can pay for 1 month of payroll. We have that set aside. So just really appreciative of the work and for laying it out this way so that we could all understand it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so this is an item we have to approve. So let's do that.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Trin, for the motion, and we'll go with Trustee Brooks for the second. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that's 4 yeses. Moving on to item 6A. Oh, goodness, my favorite thing. Hold public hearing for resolution number 05-2425, sufficiency of instructional materials, and approve resolution number 05-2425.
All right, good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Ochoa. Staff is going to invite you to hold a public hearing to receive comments regarding the sufficiency of our pupil textbooks and instructional materials. This is the season each fall where we do an accounting and make sure that all of our students have in their hands the materials they need to learn. So would ask that you move on that proposal.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing at 6:33 p.m. Are there any comments from the public here? How about on Zoom?
Checking. No public comments at this time.
Well, we're going to close the public hearing at 6:33 PM as well. Closed.
Thank you for that model of efficiency. At this point, then, there's a second part, which is simply to approve the resolution, which lays out that we have monitored our textbooks and other instructional materials and that we have sufficient materials. I would also just note that our elementary school, Lead Elementary, went through the county audit, led quite ably by Principal Natalie Delahunt, and passed with flying colors. So just wanted to call her out for good work. So if you have any questions about that resolution, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions on this item? Okay, this is the resolution. We'll just circle around again. Any public comment on the resolution here? Anybody on Zoom?
Checking. No public comment at this time.
Okay, so we need to approve this. Okay, thank you, Trustee Brooks, for the motion, and I'll give the second to Trustee Kim this time. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that was everybody. Thank you. We'll go on to item 6B, review of preliminary CASP. There, I just did the abbreviation because it was too long. Thank you.
Yes, so it's excited to bring to you the latest preliminary data we have on our student CASP performance from this past spring. Give me a second and I will share my screen, hopefully successfully. And yes. All right. So, of course, the importance of the CASP assessment each spring is it is a way in which we monitor the impact of our strategic plan work. Of course, we want to see our students learning, and we want to see their performance as measured by the CASP improving. Importantly, it also, it informs how we think about our professional development work. Certainly, it is central to our data-informed decision-making. And ultimately, how are we making decisions about the resources we have and where to spend them, of course, needs to be driven by the evidence of the impact that those resources are having. One thing that I want to share with you that has been a real exciting, I think, evolution in our work around that data decision making is the work that our assessment team has done to create new tools that can support our sites with thinking about how students are doing. So here is an example. It's just a screenshot from a Tableau dashboard. And this is a tool that is now in the hands of principals to work with their sites. It basically allows them on the spot to be able to filter and either in presentation or in committees with families to be able to answer questions that people may have on the spot in a highly visual way. But even more important, arguably, is that it also is a way that they can think about the work that we do certainly in our classrooms in providing Tier 2 supports for students, and also, it was mentioned earlier, for example, in our after-school intervention. This Tableau has this feature of where you can go in and you can click on any cell that has to do with the performance at the school, and it can call up the list of students who are performing at those different bands of performance on the CASP, which again is not met, nearly met, and exceeding. So it just puts in the hands of our teachers and our principals a very powerful, immediate. We can take the lists, we can download them, we can start thinking about who's doing well and who's not, and what kind of work we can do on behalf of those students. I'm going to invite you to walk through with me the next 6 slides. And with your permission, then I'm going to pause and actually let you ask questions and talk about what you've seen in these 6 slides. And then we'll pick up again and complete the rest of the information that's in the deck. So you can see on this slide is the performance over the last 3 years on the English portion of our CASP assessment of the group of students that we would identify as not coming from families without economic need. So you can see that in 2021-22, that in English language arts, 72.9% of our students were meeting or exceeding, and then working from right to left. In 22-23, that was 71% met or exceeded. And then this past spring, it was 72.6. I would also invite you to look at the number of students as that has changed over the last 3 years. You can see that 3 years ago, we were talking about approximately 4,500 students who came from families without specific identified economic need. And that dropped a little bit the following year, and then actually has dropped significantly this past spring. You may have question about, well, how are we defining need or not need? You'll see along the left side that family with 3 members whose combined annual income is below $47,767, that below that is considered a family of economic need. So here we're looking again at this is students coming from families without economic need in English over the last 3 years. Here's the same group in mathematics on our CASP. And again, I would just note the movement it's easiest to look at the met and exceeded, but feel free, of course, to look at the not met as well. And then also look at the total number of students that we're talking about here. And now we're going to look at the students who come from families with economic need.
Actually, sorry, can I interrupt real quickly?
Yeah, of course.
So between the math and the English slides, why did the number of students change for the same school year?
Yeah, actually, it's explained actually on this slide, which is that students who have been in the country less than 12 months, we exclude their English language arts schools.
Got it.
English language arts scores. So that essentially are newcomers we pull, but we do include them in mathematics.
Got it.
And that's approximately 100 students in the grades 3 through 8. Okay, again, so the first 2 were English and math students from families without economic need. And now we're going to look at the same data for students coming from families with economic need. From right to left, 25.1 to 21.6 to 30.6 this past year. And again, also notice what's happening to the number of students. So whereas students without economic need, that number has been declining, students from economic need, that number has been climbing. And here it is in math. Again, 17.6 for 2 years, and then a jump this past spring to 25.6. It's an 8 percentage point gain, even while the number of students in this group has climbed approximately 600 students. So
and David, if I can chime in, one of the things that we're able to do right around the time of the middle of July is we get the state's kind of raw data file. You know, it's 50,000 lines of letters and codes. And our team here, many thanks to Eliezer and Jackie and others at the district office, they make heads or tails out of it. And we produce our own graphs. But actually, right now, the district is able to see embargoed test results. They aren't public yet, so we can't share with the public our embargoed test results. We think that's going to happen sometime around the middle of October, but we've been told that before and had to wait until December. What I can share with the board is that looking historically in the state of California for this particular subgroup, which is children with economic need, coming out of the pandemic, no group had a larger drop in scores than children with economic need, and I would say add-on homeless and foster youth, but those three groups. So the growth academically that our children with economic need have experienced is a real testament to what's happening on our campuses and in those classrooms. It's something that I think every single school district would hope to achieve. And with those embargoed test results, I can share with the board, very few in the state of California have results that look like this. It'll be public in a few weeks, hopefully. But this is certainly something we look at because we know so many of our strategies aim at helping children with economic need and academic need. And I think it's important to call out in each of these slides, you see the orange portion of the graph decreasing. And I want to talk about why that's important. Some of us who've been at this a long time can remember the days of the California STAR tests and can remember what it felt like to be a teacher and a principal in those days where sanctions, like closing your school or reconstituting the staff, were held over your head. And schools did really awful things like tutor bubble kids. In other words, they would take kids looking at these results who were closest to moving into the next achievement level band and only tutor those students and purposely not tutor the students who were further behind because there was a lesser probability. So this is something many throughout the state, all different regions of the state, participated in this kind of really harmful economic tutoring strategies. So what is really important to look at for us is we're excited that our percent meeting and exceeding is growing, and that's certainly something to celebrate. I think it's equally important that our percent not meeting is declining because it shows that our attempt to move our entire student body, especially those with economic need, is really having a powerful impact. Yeah.
And I would just add that we've presented to you prior to this that this group also is actually struggling with some of the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. And even against that headwind, we're seeing this kind of growth. Yeah. So we wanted to give you a chance to think about these two groups and the levels of performance when you look at them this way. And then just to say, typically what you'll see often in more public settings is this kind of reporting, which looks at first in English. This is all of our students from 3rd through 8th grade. And you might look at that data and draw some conclusions from that about the work that's happening in the district. And we would invite you to think about that unpacking reveals a very different story. So here it is for English. And here it is for mathematics. You've heard me say, well, our performance has been a little flat, for example. And when you look at it this way, which is, appropriate way to look at it, that's very true overall. But if you back up and you look at math performance this way, or even this way, you don't see the same story. Again, these are the same 3 years. I don't know if you have any questions or comment before I move on to the rest of the presentation, but.
I have a question. Is the definition of economic need, is that the same for everywhere in California? Like Bay Area, same as random place? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I just have one quick question related to actually what the superintendent said. So when I read this chart earlier this week, I was under the assumption that the increase we saw, the 8-point jump year over year for the economic needs students was largely attributed to learning loss during the pandemic and then essentially backfilling that. But if the superintendent is saying that our improvements are beyond kind of what we're seeing statewide, I'm just curious if another district would ask us what we're doing right or what we've implemented that they should take as best practice. Do we have a good sense of what type of interventions or what type of support we put in that's different from other districts, accounting for this 8-point jump in both English and math?
It connects to a remark that David made just a minute ago, which is we really wanted to try to understand for students who weren't making progress, what criteria did they meet in addition to their economic need? Because economic need is an important sort of leveling condition. But if, Letisa, if I can pick on you, if you and I both have economic need, but I speak a different language, and I came to this country 18 months ago, but you've been here your whole life, I have some other hurdles that you don't have. And so at the same time, if I have an IEP, and I came to this country 3 years ago, and I have economic need, what we found was even those criteria had a lesser impact than the biggest, which is when children miss 20 or more days of school. So the orange bar is comprised of over 50% of kids who miss 20 or more days of school. But if I am a teacher, a third grade teacher in this district, and Letisa, since I was using you in the example, we'll continue on. Letisa has missed 21, 26, 23, 24, and 30 days of school dating back to when you're in kindergarten. That teacher is teaching a child that's missed an entire school year of school, but they're in third grade. And I miss teaching, but when you're teaching a group of kids and you're getting somewhere, and then Letisa misses the 2 days she could least afford to miss, the 2 days that are the anchor for the next 16 days of school. I don't know, you feel so defeated, you feel upset for the kid, but you have 24 other kids. You cannot rewind the tape, and that happens to a kid so many times throughout the year. So when we arrive at a place where we're saying, okay, let's see how the kids did on their reading exam, but I've missed the last 2 test dates and the makeup test date, so the school doesn't know what my reading score is because I haven't been there. The 3 times we've attempted to do it, we saw that the one largest determining factor has been our chronic absenteeism. So we have a strategy in place for that. I also think quality instruction above everything else is always going to be the top determiner for achievement. And then I think, in terms of how our scores, they're on the right trajectory, but we're far away from the goal, right? Like we have so many more goals for these kids. And that addressing the needs of our multilingual learner students is also a really big priority for us. So I'd say, David, it's fair to say our 2 biggest criteria that are still impeding progress is the chronic absenteeism and then addressing the needs of our multilingual learner students. When the embargoed scores come out, we'll be able to have those conversations with our colleagues in the peninsula and beyond.
I was just curious, just thinking about some of the comments that have been made. Do we know, or can we see at some point how it compares to pre-pandemic, like the year before? Just curious how we are
You're teeing
trending.
me up. I thought the next slides will allow us to look at some of that. It's not exact, it's not
Okay,
everything,
perfect.
but let me get to that, and you'll see some of that. So one of the things we've literally invested millions of dollars in, and we've asked our teachers to take on the challenge of implementing new curriculum and approaching this work around foundational literacy. So it's very important to think about how are our third grade students doing. And I just want to call out that we're still very early in that work. We haven't yet CASP tested students who've had 3 years of the foundational literacy strategy that we've been putting in place. But a couple years ago, 100 teachers volunteered to go off to Wharton Gillingham training, which is just obviously dramatically strengthens their skills and understanding of student needs. We began to implement some, I would call it kind of proto strategies. And then this last year's group of third graders, the first group to have at least 1 year of the PAF curriculum, they got it as second graders. So we're going to start looking at this obviously more closely, and we wanted to begin that conversation with you tonight. So here, if you look at our students, again, coming from families of economic need. Now here you have 2019. So to the question about pre-pandemic, that's our marker, the CAS performance in 2019. And then we had 23 and 24. And you can see that, again, that group has grown. Now, this is just third graders. That group has grown fairly significantly since before the pandemic. But again, you can see the percent not met is basically the same as it was pre-pandemic. But of course, look at the other end of the performance, the met or exceeded, just to give you an idea. That's 27.4% met or exceeded this past spring compared to 19.9. So basically a 5 percentage point. So we've regained the loss that happened since the pandemic, and we're actually seeing students exceed the performance of from before the pandemic. And then again, taking that group that's not specifically from economic need families, and you can see that story in terms of their performance. We haven't yet caught up with the pandemic growth. There's some signs of the percent met has improved, but exceeded has dropped. So there's some work clearly to be done there. And then there's a lot of discussion about, there's a major report that comes out each year that specifically focuses on Latinx students who also come from families of economic need. It's a place where it quite shocked us as a district several years ago that, out of, I'm going to get the numbers not exactly correct, but out of 250 districts, we were 244 in terms of our support for the performance or the growth of our students in that group. And you can see here that we're making some progress over last year, but we haven't yet caught up with our pre-pandemic performance. So that's kind of speaks to the point that the superintendent was making earlier about the variety of needs that, we're working on, but still need to address. And then just to give us, kind of a picture overall specifically of third grade English learners, not just those from families of economic need. You can see that we're improved over pre-pandemic, but not by a lot. So much work to do there. And then here's third graders with IEPs. And this data is a little confounding because it's actually, we're moving left and right at the same time, where the not met is going up, but the met or exceeded is going up. It's sort of moving to both ends of performance. So obviously a lot we need to dig in on there. The inclusion work that is really beginning to get traction, I think bodes well for shifting this picture, especially on the lower performing end. We've also talked a lot about the math strategies that we've implemented as part of our strategic plan. And just to kind of summarize where we were pre-pandemic versus what we've done in the last couple of years. And I actually apologize. I caught this afternoon, actually, my math coordinator, Amy Burkott, this afternoon. I had mistakenly identified 2022-23 as the first year of the double math class. It was actually this past year, so I was kind of thinking last year and this year is 2 years. But so if you looked at this from the what's posted on the agenda, make a slight correction to that. But you can see, basically we've expanded TOSA support. We've, implemented our math pathways. So let's take a look at some of the math data. So this again is focusing on our students of economic need. This is 3rd and 5th grade students combined in mathematics. And you can see some very dramatic improvements where, just comparing for a moment, pre-pandemic, 50.8% not met is down to 48.4%. So that's a movement in the right direction. Again, thinking about that learning loss. And on the other end of performance, pre-pandemic, 21.8% met or exceeded, and we're now 29.1%. So, basically a 7 or 8 point gain there. Again, this is exceeding pre-pandemic performance. And of course,
David, if I can chime
yeah,
in here.
please.
At any point this week, anytime a member of the public or a member of the board or any one of our employees can go back and look at this review for any school district in the peninsula and any district in the state. And the peninsula had a situation where districts fell into one of 2 categories. We had a handful of school districts that coming out of the pandemic had really, really significant learning loss, 12, 13, 14, 15% in ELA and in math. So if a district at one point was 60% meeting standards, we had a number of districts who went down as low as 44 and 45 and 46. So I think a lot of alarm bells went off in some of those districts. We fell into a different category where our drop was about 5.5 to 6%. It's been hard for those districts that fall into the category that we have to make the big jumps that we want to see because we didn't fall back as far. The districts that fell back 12, 13, 14, 15%, and some districts in the state fell back 20% or more. They've had jumps, so they'll have a meeting like tonight and say, we grew 4% or 6%, but they initially fell 20%. So we think about that because we try not to just chase a test score to have a nice graph go up. 2019 was a long time ago, folks. Those 3rd graders, right? That was a in terms of where they're at now in our educational system. Most of the kids who took those exams, when you look at the district-wide scores, they don't go to school here. They're at one of our high schools. And so we think about that because we want to really continue to have our strategies promote growth without resorting to some of the strategies of the years of old, of just solely tutoring kids who fall into one band. If we went through and just tutored the kids who were in the nearly met group, we could have a substantial growth in our met and exceeded. But our capacity to do any more than that, because you're talking about if that's 20% of 1,300 kids, that's close to 300 kids. It's a lot of kids to tutor. We couldn't also tutor the 700 kids who aren't meeting standards. And that's sort of the pressure that school districts face. So where we sit with our strategies and, the work that we're doing to try to move the district forward, it's really, I think, aimed at wanting to go deeper into the work that we're doing on our campuses and less about trying to get a test score to just jump up from one year to the next. Because districts that do that pay the price the following year. So if you tutor kids in 3rd grade, they're ready to take the 3rd grade test. If you don't also tutor them in 4th grade, they really struggle on that 4th grade test. And there are some of us who look up every district. There are districts throughout the peninsula that you see those 1 year jumps and they don't last. And I think our middle school teachers and certainly our high school teachers, they want kids to be able to read. They want kids to like school. So that's just an addendum to some of the conversation we've had so far.
Yeah. So obviously the work of our teachers in 3rd to 5th grade has just been very strong and particularly impacting this group. Similarly in middle school, it's a similar level of growth and decline we haven't quite gotten there from percent not met back to pre-pandemic, but when you look at our met or exceeded percent, 21.7 versus 16.7, so 5 points above where we were pre-pandemic. And then just because the question came up at our last conversation about the data, this is, this kind of reorient you here. So we took the CAS performance of students who are last spring were in the double math class. So that's the 2024, and we looked back at, well, how did they perform as 7th graders? Because the question is, if it's great that we're increasing the numbers of students who are in double math, but it should dramatically affect their learning as well. So, and so we just, obviously we'll talk about grades, we'll talk about future high school course taking, but this just from the CAS data, you can see that, obviously this is a group of students who in choosing to do double math, maybe not obviously, but they were already pretty strong performers as 7th graders. But then participating in the double math class, you can see, for example, that ironically the met went down, but the exceeded went from 61.1% to 73.9. That's a 13 percentage point gain. And this is approximately 250 students, give or take. So, so just to confirm that, that this is a strategy that is accelerating student learning and preparing them for advanced course taking in high school. And then I've included in here some other slides, which actually, with your permission, because we've had a good conversation already, I'm just going to kind of go through them real quick, but these are kind of the other things that we should be looking at. So here's the performance of all English learners, 3rd through 8th. Would remind you that the profile of our English learners pre-pandemic included a lot of students who actually scored 4s on the LPAC. That no longer is the case. So, so I just to recall that reclassification improvement has impacted that performance. Here's our students with IEPs in English. Again, pre-pandemic compared to, you can see that we're certainly have made up the learning loss that came from the pandemic. And this is sort of the classic, ethnic racial group breakdown, not met, nearly met, and exceeded. So you can look at this and you can see, as the superintendent said, obviously we have a ways to go. We still have some significant equity challenges that exist here, but we're excited about the progress we're making. Here's sort of similarly for math. This is all English learners, 3rd through 8th grade. This is students with IEPs. And here we are looking at ethnic racial groups. And just to do a quick, we also, the science test is considered part of the CASP assessments. And so I just want to show you, this is all the students combined, but remember, it's only in 5th and 8th grade that we take the science assessment. And, again, this is kind of one of those, it's a little bit flat. But interestingly, if you break it down by 8th and 5th, this is 8th grade. And this is, excuse me. Yeah, no, this is 5th grade of students with economic need. My apologies. And you can see kind of that same improvement we were looking at in other areas. And then this is 8th grade students overall. You can see there's some real progress there. And this is where I was drawing the comparison. There's a different story, 8th grade versus 5th, that we are looking at and wanting to, because our 5th grade improvement is not the same, just to toggle back, as our 8th grade improvement. So there's some things we need to look at there as far as how we can better support the science instruction in elementary. Okay, we'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions? No. I had a question. So are we able to compare ourselves with other districts with this data, or we wait till the dashboard, or how does it work?
Well, there'll be an opportunity to do that. I should say, we're feeling pretty confident. We've done a little bit of, or I should say the superintendent particularly has done a little bit of poking around in the embargo data that we're feeling positive about. But we can't really speak to that, until the data is publicly available. So we can come back and talk about that.
Okay, I'm just curious because to Trustee Kim's point, if we can see, if let's say our growth in some of these areas isn't as big as other districts, I'd want to know what they're doing, or if we're like knocking out of the park, even though I think there's lots of room for improvement, then that's also good to know. So I'd just be curious to have some comparison data. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll go to public comment. Anything from the audience here? Anyone on Zoom?
Checking. No public comments on Zoom.
Okay, back to board comments and discussion.
I just want to say thanks very much for putting this presentation together and showing us like different ways that the data breaks down, and also including the numbers so we can see there's certain groups that really grew significantly, and that affects, it does impact the scores, and it's really great to be able to see significant progress even when the group, certain groups that face a lot of challenges have grown. So, thanks to the Ed Services, and thanks to all the teachers and TOSAs and, everyone who's on the ground doing the work of actually educating our kids. I'll say, as someone who had a 3rd grader last year and started kindergarten in 2020, it was the worst. Just if you can imagine a squirrely kindergartner on Zoom. And so I've really gotten to see, the teachers here know, but I've really gotten to see the impact of the curriculum and instructional approaches, the changes in the instructional approaches in those early elementary school classes, and just seeing the confidence, I think, with which kids are able to have the discussions has been really great. So I just want to applaud everyone's hard work, and let's keep going.
I would like to echo my fellow trustee, Trent. And I also would like to just say thank you for the presentation. Very informational, and really kudos and thanks for the support that that we've implemented for our teachers to be able to change strategies in supporting our students. Being affected, having a kid who was affected by the pandemic significantly, along with many others, to see this impact is really enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo the comments from the other trustees, and really do want to thank you, David, for the way you presented the information. I think just every single time you come out with this data, it's very helpful just having the breakdown, especially I think the example of disaggregated data, where if you look at it collectively, you get one conclusion, but by seeing the breakout, we can actually see that we made progress. I think it's really helpful to have that dive, and then connecting that to the narrative, to the strategies that implemented, to the great work of all of our teachers and staff. It's always great to see when things are working, and then to get a deeper dive into areas we can improve, but also best practices that we can share. I think we're doing a lot of amazing things here in the district, and the better we can present that, both to our families in our district, but to others as well, I think we have a tremendous impact. And I think, just to echo Trustee Trent's point, When I think about losses of learning, my daughter starting as a first grader on Zoom, I was basically teaching her from home, so it's mainly my fault. But I'm glad that the teachers have undone my damage and actually brought everyone back for full force. So appreciate that.
Thank you, David, for the presentation and all the information here. I go back to the like horizontal graph on the ethnic and racial groups, and I think just looking at math alone, you can almost put a mirror up to the Asian results and Hispanic Latinx, and they're like opposite. If you just smash them together, they would be the same. And so I think this graph is interesting just to be able to visually see the disparities between the different groups, and you know, obviously this one's like just stagnant. You don't see growth over year, but in combination with the other graphs that you showed, it really does paint the story of what's going on in our district, and I appreciate it. The growth that we're seeing is amazing. Obviously, there's a lot of students that still have some need. I question the definition of economic need, especially in our area. I wonder if we pulled in more families that are actually in need, what that would also look like. I know that we're stuck with the definition here, but I just think that there's probably a lot more families and students that are in those categories. But thank you so much for all this information.
We talked about that at our task force meeting today. The average median income for San Mateo County, I think it was, they said Marin County, San Mateo County, and the County of San Francisco, or the City of San Francisco, are the three highest AMIs in the state, and it isn't close. So $47,000 per year for a family of three, just, it's mind-blowing. But we spent some time at Lead Elementary School a few weeks back because we wanted to have a conversation with our kindergarten teachers there, who saw something they hadn't seen in a long time, which is students who came from predominantly Spanish-speaking and non-English-speaking households, because they do have a significant number of kids who come from Central American countries that don't speak Spanish per se. But the kids were prepared for kindergarten to the extent of being able to write their own name, not be fearful about being at the school for the first time, understanding where things were at the school, and a sense of joy and excitement for the school year, as opposed to feelings of abandonment and dread and fear for these 5-year-olds. And it's because we invested so much in our preschool education program, and we opened 2 classrooms at Laurel this week. And we have classrooms at San Mateo Park and at Sunnybrae. And I really look forward to 6 years from now, when these 3 and 4-year-olds, who, if we do our job well, we get them in when they're 3. Because what we're seeing and hearing from our educators is that has a leveling effect for kids that takes the economic challenge and really reduces it in terms of their accessibility to learn at grade level. So we're watching those scores very carefully and closely. And if you think back to Patrick's presentation, one of the reserve accounts, or one of the accounts that's set aside, is child development. And we spent close to $7 million last year on our early childhood education program. And 4 years ago, we spent $2.5 million. We also brought in multiple millions more, because almost all of it pertains to state funding that comes in to facilitate those programs. But it's an important investment, and it connects to the larger strategy we have of leveling the playing field as early as possible for as many kids as possible. And then once we can get our chronic absenteeism down and handled a lot more effectively, we have some strategies this year to do that. I think we're going to be sitting here in a year being really excited about what we see.
Well, thank you again for that. We can move on to item 7A. Update on special education department.
Good evening, everyone. Just give me a moment to get my slides up here. Okay. All right. Hoping everyone can see. Yeah, looks like you can. All right. Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Ochoa. I am Heather Morgan. I'm the Director of Special Education for the San Mateo-Foster City School District. Tonight, we'll just be reviewing some program updates and implications. We do a little data review, some fiscal updates, staffing, and a report on our community partnerships and CDAC. Okay, I wanted to start out with, this is the locations of all of the programs in our district, the special education programs. If you look at this same form from 4 years ago, it's very different. I didn't include that tonight, but I did want to highlight that we are far more balanced than we were. The goal here is to provide a continuum of services in each complex to the best of our ability. Some programs are more rare. For example, the Mod Severe programs. So we don't have one of those in every complex, but we did try to spread them out as much as possible so that students in any complex can attend schools close to their homes, regardless of their eligibility. We're also working on building programs more balanced throughout the district for inclusion and, like I said, proximity to home. So when I'm talking about students with disabilities, the way that we count them is this is any student who qualifies for an IEP in any eligibility category. So it's a broad spectrum of eligibilities. Right now, we have 1,305 students in our district who are eligible. That's about 12.6% of our students. And just to break down who serves these students in our department, we have 29 RSP teachers, 18 mild mod SDC teachers, 7 moderate to severe SDC teachers, and 2 therapeutic program teachers. In addition to that, we have a large team of other categories. So we also have psychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, assistive technology teachers, deaf and hard of hearing teachers, and adaptive PE teachers. And then we also, over the last 4 years now, have been developing out our behavior team, which did not exist 3 years ago. So now we have what I like to refer to as kind of a pyramid. It's overseen by a group of 6 board certified behavior analysts, also known as BCBAs. Under them is a larger group of registered behavior technicians. They are also certificated, so they go through more rigorous training and actually have certificates of training for behavior. And then we have behavior techs and then 3 levels of paraeducators, para 1s, 2s, and 3s. 3s being the newest group in our district. No one in the district is hired as a para 3. What happens is if a para 2 is interested in getting more training and it is a higher level position, we have internal training that a para 2 can go through, and then they would apply for the para 3 position. So that brings them with a little bit higher level of training, more similar to like what maybe an RBT has, but without the actual certification. This is just updates on a couple of new programs that we added in the last year and this year. So last year we had our pilot year of the therapeutic learning centers. There's one at Brewer Island and there's one at Bowditch Middle School. So last year we just kicked it off. It was a brand new program. We learned, we pivoted, we conducted cycles of inquiry to see what was working and what wasn't. We adjusted staffing. So this is now year 2. We are implementing those adjustments based on what we learned last year. We've refined our response skills of the team. We've developed systems with a larger campus. And these programs are supported by the site administrators, our district coordinators, the program specialists for induction, the behavior team, and department administration. And right now, the enrollment at Brewer Island is 5 students, and at Bowditch, it's 8. And as everything with special education, the numbers fluctuate often. So these numbers are accurate as of me posting this on the agenda.
Hey, Heather, this is Gene. I had a quick question about the TLC program.
Sure.
So when Trustee Watkins and I met with the teachers last, or I guess a few months ago, there were a lot of concerns about the TLC rollout. I know that was the pilot year. So you said in the second bullet that we're implementing adjustments based on, I guess, observations you made from the pilot. Can you clarify what some of those adjustments were in more detail? Because I know there was kind of a rough start, but I'm sure that we're adjusting based on what we learned last year.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say one of the things that we've adjusted is who is in the classroom and how those people are in charge. So we've given much more ownership to the site itself. One of the things that we found wasn't working was that the programs were operating like satellites on a campus instead of being incorporated into the site itself. So we've given much more ownership to the site administration and to the site psychologists. We had kind of a distinct team that was serving those 2 classes. So like a psychologist that was only assigned to those 2 classes. This year, we've got the site psychologist also encompassing support for the class. Then we've added in a mental health clinician. That last year we had a counselor position. We found that actually the counselor and the psychologist were very similar in their skill sets, and it was sort of an unnecessary duplication of services. So we've got the mental health clinician now able to be more present for the 2 campuses. And the psychs are there because they're also doing their other psychology work with, identifying and assessing students on their main campuses. So that was a big difference too. We also are visiting some of the successful therapeutic programs. They're hard to find because they're far away, and we are very unique in that we've developed this in our district. It was actually a pretty bold move on our part. So we are working with other districts that do have therapeutic programs and observing them to see what is working for them and where we can learn from best practices. I think that kind of covers there's also some more little things that we adjust as we go. The final thing that I think also makes a difference is making sure that the class feels like a class. And when we first started, just because we were brand new and bringing small numbers of students in, the numbers were so small that it didn't necessarily feel like a classroom because there were like only 2 or 3 students in there. Now we're building it up. We've got 5 now in the elementary program and 8 in the middle school program. So there's a little bit more sense of class camaraderie, and they've got to know each other. And then we're also working carefully to make sure that everyone in the general education side is trained in safety care and that they have more understanding of what the specific needs are, what we might expect from the students that are coming into their classes and on their campus. And then finally, we worked closely with SMFCSD in the development of the contract in the spring. And one of the things that was really important to the teachers union was that we made sure that de-escalation training became a priority, and that all staffs would receive de-escalation training if we anticipated that they may come across a student with escalated behaviors. And so we have done that in the past, but we really made a dedicated rollout of safety care training for everyone, and especially we've prioritized doing it first with schools that have the TLCs and also schools that have known behaviors. And the safety care is it's a certificated program that expires annually. So once you've been trained, everyone in that program, and we track this, everyone in that program gets recertified a year later. So this year we have recertifications going and we have new certifications going, and it's just a dedicated rollout, and our behavior team oversees that.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. And just to clarify, how often do TLC students access general education? And is the program this year different from last year?
So it's different for every student. It depends on their IEP. So every student's IEP dictates the amount of time that they spend in gen ed. So I can't say as a blanket statement because like I said, each student is very different. What they do all have in common is that if at any moment they need to access it, they have the ability to do that. I'm sorry, what was the second question?
I just want to confirm it was different from last year, but I think since it's individualized, we just
Yeah,
want to
it's
clarify what the
individualized.
policy is.
So it's like, for example, the elementary program has all completely different kids from last year, so can't really compare them.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, and then the other class that we added this year was a 3-5 mod severe SDC at Beach Park. And this is really nice because it's expanding our SDC offerings for students who are in the K2 program there. Quite a few of the K2 students at Beach Park were graduating into 3rd grade, and we wanted them to be able to stay at the same school with their community and their families. So we created a class for them to move up into and to stay at Beach Park instead of having for them to move to a different school. And there are 8 students in that program. Okay, and this is just a little update on our inclusion efforts. So we are now in our 2nd year of support from Supporting Inclusive Practices, SIP, which is a CDE funded program. This, with a combination of support from SIP, our department, and Changing Perspectives, the Inclusion Task Force is collaborating to bring our goals to reality. And so we're moving forward with building out the sites that we're focusing on for inclusion. So Foster City and George Hall were year 1 schools last year. We're calling them year 2 focus schools. And then we've added also, let's see, Meadow Heights, and I think I have it on another slide, Abbott and Highlands. So they are also year 1 schools for this year. So we now have 5 focus schools. And the Inclusion Leadership Team is actually today visiting Chime Institute in Woodland Hills. So this is all sponsored by SIP. It's a full inclusion school in LA Unified, and it's supported by the Schwarzenegger Endowment. And this is a picture of some of our very own administrators meeting with Governor Newsom yesterday as they arrived for this opportunity. And then also we did hire an inclusion TOSA for George Hall Elementary School, since they are a year 2 focus school, and that person will be supporting them as more and more students from their SDCs are included in general education. Okay, this is really good news for us. The state gave us indicators or goals based on students with disabilities who spend more than 80% of their day in general education. And the goal for 23-24 was that 64% of students with IEPs would spend more than 80% of their day in general education. We actually in San Mateo-Foster City exceeded that. So we actually met the 24-25 goal last year with 67%. So we're already ahead of the game. We're doing great. And as we are doing more dedicated efforts to get students into general education settings, we anticipate that we will continue to exceed this goal. Okay, and I just reviewed these, but this is what this is sort of the roadmap of where we've been. So last year we had our year 1 focus schools. In addition to being the focus schools, we also had professional development, parent education, and Best Buddies. Best Buddies is kind of like a club that's supported by our Ed Foundation, and it gives authentic opportunities for both students with and without IEPs to spend time together in a more relaxed kind of casual setting. They get to make friends, get to know each other on a different level. They can play games, they have lunch together sometimes. There's been field trips. It's a great opportunity for students. And then our year 2 focus schools, as I mentioned before, I won't spend too much time on this, but this is what our year 1 schools are working on. Move this out of here. Okay. So our 3 new year 1 schools are Meadow Heights, Highlands, and Abbott. And then in our preschool programs, we're reserving gen ed seats for students with IEPs. And we're prioritizing mainstreaming for students in SDC. We also we have added an SDC pre-K at Foster City School so that students there have an opportunity to be included with gen ed pre-K. And let's see, Beach Park move in 2025. Yeah. And then let's see, I talked about our SIP supported visit to Chime in LA Unified, which, like I said, is happening literally today. And then we have next year, new year one proposed schools. We need to review some data before we make these final decisions, but we're looking at Sunnybrae, San Mateo Park, and Burrell Middle School as being inclusion schools for 25-26. Okay, and these are some things that we do just in terms of inclusion implementation. So one thing we're working on, this is not completely thorough, and there are some kind of overlapping department things we need to figure out, but dual rosters, which means that you save space in the rosters in both gen ed and special day classes for students to make sure there's room for them when they do push in. Also, we have to consider the physical environments. So make sure that we are ADA compliant. We consider the location of classrooms. We try to put them in parts of the school that are not, you know, hidden off away and are central parts of the school. And then we also consider placement to facilitate smooth integration into other parts of the campus. And then also our program locations. So we're using the complex model that I described earlier to further like local access to schools and programs and to reduce excessive transportation. Okay, and these are some partnerships in the community and internally that I just wanted to highlight. We are, again, this year participating in a joint Special Olympic event with Burlingame and Hillsborough school districts. And also we've just added Millbrae in the spring. So we'll be sharing these events. San Mateo-Foster City will actually host the first one this year. Later October, we'll be doing soccer. And that's really fun. All of the kids from the other districts take buses over. It's a really fun day of big celebration and activities, and have kind of a picnic and just have a really good time. And it's fun. It's a fun collaboration. Also, the Ed Foundation, as they mentioned earlier this evening, they are supporting our Best Buddies chapters, and they are generously giving each of those schools money so that they can afford like games, activities, outings, field trips, and things for both students with and without IEPs. And then, as I also mentioned earlier, we do have a partnership with SMFCSD. Our negotiations did focus on Article 12, which is safety, and we came to agreements to support strengthening our unit members' skill sets in terms of de-escalation and safety care. And this hopefully will allow for more inclusion for students who may not have had access to general education settings previously. And also, we have reinstated the special education leadership team. We've had our first meeting already, and we meet monthly with a joint created agenda for issues that are coming up in the sites and in our special education programs for us to work through together collaboratively. And then finally, we have our CDAC meetings. That's for our families and anyone else who wants to come. And we've done listening sessions, we have monthly meetings, and we have site leadership teams. And we usually finish the year with a really fun CDAC picnic. Okay, and then one thing that I think really outlines our growth in the district over the last few years is compliance. Special education, we have created some significant changes in order to increase our legal compliance. And one of them is our inclusion work, which really is important for disrupting biases, which impact views about how to help students who are struggling to learn. And we increase attention on other factors that are impacting learning. So our MTSS and inclusion, and not jumping to assessment for special ed as the only cure or solution for kids who are struggling to learn. We're looking at other factors. Also, significant disproportionality This is very, very good news, and I have to say it's very rare. Most districts do not experience this. But our risk factor was reduced so low for 24, 25 that the CDE has actually removed our label as being significantly disproportionate in our eligibility for Hispanic male students in primary grades under the eligibility of SLD. So we've been working on that for a long time. One of the things that, well, we've done multiple things, but as I mentioned before, making sure that we utilize other interventions before we assess students. Also taking care to review exclusionary factors before we jump to saying that a student has disabilities if they're struggling to learn. And then the last piece, which is a reflection of our compliance improvement, is that we've had a reduction of about 50% in our legal settlements. Just to compare from 21 to 24, in the 21-22 school year, there were 23 complaints and over $1 million spent on those complaints. And the 23-24 school year, we cut that in half to 12 settlements and by more than 50% reduced the amount of money spent on those. So I think that is a remarkable reflection of an improvement in compliance and strengthening our cases, and that our reports are stronger and cleaner than ever. I did review this earlier. I want to talk just a little bit about our behavior team. The safety care training, I did talk about that we are recertifying annually, and that we are prioritizing sites with no behavior challenges. We have a variety of situations. So I've had some principals call and say, hey, we don't really need this. And I say, well, you're going to get it, but we can put you lower on the priority list, and we can put someone else, another school that is feeling a more urgent need for it sooner. We've also been growing our BCBA team. So we're up to 6 now. We they with 3 years ago. And this is that same pyramid that I mentioned earlier with the RBTs, the BTs. And they are there, the RBTs and BTs are there to collect data, to observe behaviors, and then give support and suggestions for behavioral strategies that will improve student behavior. And then we've also invested in mental health and behavior support. And again, that's the BCBA pyramid. So that's something financially that's important in our department. And we have definitely built that up by the addition of these FTEs. David did cover quite a bit of academic data with you for the CASP reviews. I did want to include this though, just because we do pay attention to our growth. However, I just want to mention, I think I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, that when we disaggregate students with disabilities data, it includes all students that are eligible for an IEP. And that's a very large spectrum of students with very individual needs. So while we are seeing, you know, this one is showing the met and exceeded. There's a slight reduction in language arts. It's a little bit bigger in math this year. However, we have to consider other factors, because these students may have they may belong to other categories also. And we consider the fact that each of their IEPs is different. So this would include anyone. It could be eligibility for a speech-only IEP, all the way to being eligible for a mod severe classroom and everything in between. And this is our data for mathematics. Like I said, little dip there in the met and exceeded this year. It looks similar to what Mr. Chambliss shared earlier. And I always include this just to keep an eye on these. These are our non-public school actuals. We have 30 students right now attending non-public schools. This number can fluctuate, and it depends on what their needs are. Each of these schools have very specific offerings for the type of students and the profiles that they accept. Typically, these are students who have needs that exceed what our district can provide internally. So we have 30 right now, and that is pretty much status quo. Sometimes more, sometimes less. We have reduced it in the last few years. Okay, and then I also like to, because this is our non-public agency costs. So we have paraeducators that support students in our district, and we're trying to increase the number of people that are district. So we, of course, value our partners in the agencies, but we would really prefer to have most of these employees be San Mateo-Foster City employees. So you can see a comparison of from 22 all the way to 25, and the total number. In 22-23, we had a total number of 205 paras working with students in the district. There's a little dip last year down to 193, and this year we have about 199. I will say this number changes daily, especially with the agency employees, that it fluctuates greatly, and the people that are hired and quit or don't return can fluctuate enormously from day to day. We've also reduced the number of agencies that we're working with. In some of the agencies, we've discontinued our relationships with them. You can see that we're no longer working with 3 groups in 24-25. And then these are our current vacancies. We actually are doing great right here. We are fully staffed for SLPs, but I include this on here because we are still trying to fill all positions with district hires and in person. And so we do keep it posted on EdJoin, but all of our schools are staffed, and we don't have any schools that are missing an SLP right now. And then our SDC preschool is staffed, but it's with a program specialist, and that's not really what she's intended for. And so it is posted, and we are hiring for a permanent placement. Okay, and then this is just a quick review of our CDAC. We had our first meeting on September 10th, and you can see we have meetings scheduled for November, February, April, and then our June picnic. All meetings have simultaneous Spanish translation, and they are recorded and on the CDAC website along with the slides that we use. The focus on these is we really want to get concepts and ideas that families are interested in. We do invite speakers often, and the priority is to reach several stakeholder groups, and that we invite everyone. So parents, community members, teachers, staff, and related service providers are encouraged to join and come and learn together. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heather. Are there questions from the board on this? Mm-hmm.
Thank you again for that, Heather. And it's really great to see a lot of the developments and stats that you're able to highlight in your presentation. I will say that when I'm out in the community, whether it's with teachers or with parents and others, I do hear a lot of questions about our special ed program and things that are changing constantly. And so I did want to bring up some of those issues now. So going back to some of your slides, with the SIP grants and the Changing Perspectives groups and others, one question we often get when we launch these pilot programs like the TLC or with SIP in the year 1 schools is what specific changes we're making year over year, and also how we're collecting feedback. I think whether it's from parents or from teachers, there's always a concern that some of the key stakeholders who are on the ground aren't being consulted. So can you just describe your process from year 1 to year 2 with SIP in particular? What kind of feedback we got from the year 1 schools? I believe you said it was George Hall and Foster, and whether or not both parents and teachers were consulted in that process?
Sure. So last year we conducted listening sessions for both the fall and the spring at both of those schools specifically. So that was part of the input. And then also we have surveys that have gone out. So we're collecting all of that as well. And then the last piece that I think is the most—
Surveys are to teachers and to parents?
The George Hall and Foster City both received surveys from Changing Perspectives about a week ago. So I don't know if they've gone out yet, but they should be sending them out to the community soon. They do have those. Changing Perspectives has asked them to send them out to all of their teachers as well. And then I was gonna say we also, like I said, we've reinstated our SPED leadership team, which meets monthly, and that's an open invitation. And we have representatives from all of the categories of employees and related service providers, teachers. Anybody can come And that is designed specifically to collect feedback, not just for SIP or inclusion necessarily, but for all facets of education, of special ed.
That's great. We had heard that the group hadn't been meeting last year, but it's great to hear that it's been reinstated and the group is meeting again. And then looking ahead, especially on the gen ed side, it's great to hear that we're running ahead in terms of our goals for that. I guess we get a lot of questions again, both from teachers and parents, in terms of the specific types of support that we're providing for these students and whether or not the way we're doing gen ed inclusion is meaningful and effective. And so just to get a sense for some of the programs that we're running, and I understand with IEP there's a lot of variation, do we have extra staff or assistants in the room when these sessions are happening? Or what is our approach to making sure that the gen ed is meaningful inclusion as opposed to a checkbox?
Right. So inclusion really relies on a professional development piece, which all of last year, for the first time, I think probably in my whole career, we consistently, every single opportunity that we had, so summer, fall, winter, and spring, all of those professional development sessions had a focus on inclusion for all staff. It wasn't only special ed, it was for gen ed also. We started with a mindset shift because it does require that. And then we moved into more specific strategies. We will continue to work on those things on a large scale, but also having the inclusion TOSA and other types of leadership and also the like at a high level, the addition of staffing and the dual rostering, and those things are all built to support a successful experience for students. Now, again, it's individualized, so every student's IEP who is included is different. Some students have a lot of minutes where they're included in the gen ed setting, and some students have less. But the main idea is that they get to spend as much time as possible, that they can be successful there. If they have factors like behaviors that are impeding them, then that's where we come in with safety care. That student may or may not have an adult next to them. They may have a para, but what we really have to be careful of is not looking at the paras as the solution for inclusion, because a para, having an adult stand right next to you is actually far more restrictive than being in a special day class. So we want to make sure that they're safe. We want to make sure that the people in the room know what they're doing with the student, and that the student has an opportunity to belong, that they're not like an alien in the classroom, and that they actually are part of the class and have, a meaningful experience there. And for every student in the class, what meaningful is going to look different. Sometimes just, being able to be part of the class or experience maybe an art lesson or something else that they didn't have access to before. But we do focus heavily on the specials, and then students who are able to do academic lessons as well, then we include that as well for them in their IEP goals.
And Heather, if I can jump in here.
Please.
Part of our approach to redesigning our behavioral support system district-wide was a reaction to what we saw across the district, in that our sites were really running into a situation where student behaviors would rise to the level of being really extreme blowouts, really extreme behavioral outbursts. Things like, in a classroom, you might see kids throwing chairs across the room, or kids, sobbing, screaming, knocking all the books down in the library. And at the time, we just didn't have staff with training to be able to be present in that moment and interpret the behavior, and then send them back in to be able to observe and come up with recommendations about how to support the student. So these 6 board certified behavior analysts are experts in that area. And I don't want to say the exact number, but our team of registered behavior technicians are the next level right below those board certified behavior analysts. And now our para 3s are an additional team member. So if you take a school like Meadow Heights, one of our teachers, Mrs. Fosaseca, is particularly adamant about giving children the access to their typical class from the outset of their experience at Meadow Heights. And so if you go into her classroom, you'll often find that the lights are off and no one's in there because every single student in her STC class is included at that time. And she still has plenty of aides, but the aides are out. Like in one instance, we went during our literacy summit last year, and Hedeliza, our teacher, was teaching a literacy lesson to a small group of kids that were in her focus group. But you couldn't tell who the child was that had an IEP. And so for that day and that lesson, meaningful inclusion meant you're sitting at a U-shaped table with 4 other kids learning to read. To a child with very intensified behavioral outbursts, that isn't meaningful inclusion. Meaningful inclusion is, I got to be part of the art lesson. So when you're looking at a program like the therapeutic program at Brewer Island and Bowditch, the starting point for each kid is different. And the criteria that has an impact on what their school day is like is different, not only based on their social, emotional, and academic needs, but also on their developmental needs. Like, you know, you have kids, but you're like, when she was 7, such and such, and then 3rd grade came, and I don't know what happened because kids are developing physiologically and socially, and their needs change. So what looks like meaningful access in 3rd grade might actually change in 4th grade. And, if we're doing it right, we can often make more ground up to give kids more access. But the other thing I wanted to mention, we didn't discuss it in the presentation today other than to talk about the staffing component, but our preschools, our California State preschools, are approaching really, really high percentages of full inclusion, like in the 90%. So when you go into our California State preschool programs, I would test anybody to distinguish who the child is that has an IEP because they're all in the same class. And we still have the staff. We haven't, as you saw on the charts, we didn't reduce the staff per se, but they're now operating in a different way to be part of the classroom ecosystem. And, probably, I think they do keep their eye out. They're sort of cognizant of the child with special needs and providing services. But we're also doing training to not hover or sort of kind of hand over hand support because the inclusion needs to be tied to independence and to development. And that's a really, really high goal to reach. And if we ever reach it, I'll be, happier than anybody around. But it's certainly a goal worth going for each time.
Thank you for the presentation. I attended the last CDAC meeting, and I think those have been really helpful to kind of, give people an opportunity to see what the process is like for IEPs. And I know there's just a lot of great speakers and information given out at those meetings. And I also recognize that there's, confidentiality considerations, but for the monthly leadership meetings, since those are open to, any stakeholders, I would just request that be posted on the district website and maybe sent out in district communication so people know about that. And then, I know that the CDAC meetings that I've been to anyway have really just been like sharing information and not an opportunity to discuss or to connect with other people who might be experiencing similar challenges or, so I would just love to see more opportunities for parents or, families to get together. I know that we have a barbecue event, I think. But I would just love to have more information sharing amongst SPED families in general. And I know that one of the people on the CDAC committee stepped down recently, and thank you so much for her service. And I don't know if there's an opportunity for other people to join, but if it hasn't gone out, maybe we could send out some information on that too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I had a question. I guess it's similar to Trustee Kim's question, but When's the last time we've done like a comprehensive survey of like everybody about special ed? I'm talking about teachers, classified staff, really everybody, just to find out, are there any school sites that are like winning and school sites that are struggling in this area? How are general ed teachers feeling about inclusion? Is it working as planned? Are we following everything that should be happening for each student? Just some of these new programs that we're implementing. I just wondered about a comprehensive survey where we hear from everybody. And I'm just gonna like tie this back to Kathy's part earlier when she talked about the hopes and wishes and values of SMETA, and I just want to be supportive of what they're after this year and making sure that we're including all voices and hearing from everybody. So just curious about that question.
Yeah, we've done it like more, I would say like more separate ones. I don't think we've done like an like a one at the scale that you're describing. So that's something we could think about. I haven't, like I said, I have more finite ones, you know, like specifically about inclusion or specifically about community schools, or, you know, we've done all of those along the way. We collected them at all of the listening sessions last year for people who came to those. And those listening sessions were specifically about inclusion. We did use some of the community school meetings as it was kind of a double layered conversation. And at that time we collected information about inclusion, but it turned out being information both about special education inclusion and then just personal inclusion and just feeling welcome on your campus and what you need from your school. So those surveys went out at, we had 8 of those last year. But again, those were specific to the sites. They weren't a district-wide survey. So that's something that we could develop.
Okay, thank you. I would just ask that if, you know, as you do these surveys, if you can share some of the data from them so that we can hear a little bit more about, I guess, the specific surveys, what are the results, but yeah, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just echo President Proctor's call for that comprehensive survey, or at least the data from the targeted ones. I do think that'd be very helpful. Apologies, I have a few more follow-up questions. So I think the last thing you mentioned before on professional development for teachers. So my understanding based on the presentation, a lot of it does focus on challenging behaviors, escalation issues. Is there, I guess, a component that also talks about how to, again, for meaningful inclusion, work in UDL, differentiation, or other programs to support the special needs students, or is that not yet part of the professional development program?
We work in collaboration with our education services department on that. So specifically, if we haven't gotten into, we started UDL with the spring professional development of 24. So spring of 24, we had a speaker from SIP come out and do work on that. And then also Sam from Changing Perspectives came out prior. So both of their all district PDs did cover some universal design for learning strategies, and also not in so much as like you do this kind of a way, but in opening minds to say like these are things that you're already doing that can be made more universal, so that it could be a little bit more I think applied, and with a group that big, you know, we've got everything from I think that was the whole K-5 group. And then we did separately with his 6/8s with Dr. Gall. So they've gotten a beginning of that. We haven't gone deep into very specific strategies for each grade level, but yes, we started it last year. It'll continue with Ed Services this year.
Great. And then I also wanted to ask that the comment I hear the most from parents of special ed students is just the issue around communication. And my understanding is that was partly due to some staffing fluctuations that happened last year. But looking ahead, I guess one thing I hear a lot from parents is how often are staffing or structure changes communicated proactively to parents or of special ed students, as opposed to when they come to CDAC meeting or if they come to special leadership team meeting, getting it that way. A lot of the parents I spoke with were feeling like they were largely in the dark about what's happening in the classroom, other than maybe like a beginning of the year and like a quarterly. So I just wasn't sure if there is a lot of proactive communication as, say, the support structure changes for their students.
I'm not totally clear on what that means, but if you mean like if the teacher's not there, or if some other sort of support would change?
So one parent I spoke with mentioned that the staff that was supporting their student kept changing, and I think it's partly because of the way we've structured it, where we have the same specialist serving multiple sites. But it created a situation where their student felt very much like they weren't sure who to turn to, or there was a
I see.
constant like new, yeah.
Yeah, so in general, it would be a combination of support from their coordinator, the district coordinator assigned to their school, and their principal. But I would probably need more information about the specifics to make sure that that family was getting the information that they need, without knowing more details about, the individual.
Heather, if I can chime in here. One of the challenges of having contractor staff is that as a school district, we have very little leverage to insist that service providers remain the same. Our HR department could produce something for our next update on special education. When it comes to in-district staff, somebody who gets their check from us, not through one of these other contractors, I think the consistency factor is high. I'll let HR give us the data on that because we can track it year over year, but it's going to be pretty high. Where it's extremely low is when the employer is Maxim or Stepping Stones or any one of our other vendors, because they hire quickly, but they lose people quickly. So to a parent who has a child that might have a speech and language pathologist who's paid for by a provider, that SLP might change every 9 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks. And we find out about it like 15 minutes before the services start. And ask any principal, they're not here anymore, but ask any principal, they'll tell you, people show up to my school and they say, hey, I'm here from this company and I think I'm replacing somebody named Latisa, and where do I go? Well, look at our teachers are nodding their heads because you've seen it in your classroom. So that's part of almost the stress of we have to have somebody, and we're very grateful that we are able to bring on people through these agencies. And actually some of our agency employees are wonderful, but it's that component of the unpredictability and the people that cycle through that to a parent can just seem really disorienting and like almost like a disrespect in that, great, my kid came home and told me they have another new person. So I think that really drives a lot of our desire to try to get as many of our employees to be school district employees. Patrick's not going to like hearing this, but one of the proposed, well, that means we're like thinking about spending more money. One of the proposed solutions is we think that these job classifications that pay higher on the scale and investing in having more of our employees move upward and opening more of those types of positions might actually deprioritize the need to hire external providers, because our current providers will see that those jobs exist and that they are stable and that they pay comparably to what they earn through those external employers. And we'll go through a process in the fall and in the spring of determining where and what grade levels in which schools. But we would certainly like to get those numbers of non-district employees from 95 down to 70, then down to 50, and ultimately, if we're really good at this, get it down into the single digits, just as needed, just like sort of emergency situations. And I think that's probably, Heather, you're not on the screen anymore, but I know you're still on the call. I think that sort of variability really does pertain much more to those, to those direct service providers that tend to work for agencies. But again, HR can put together that data for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Cho. I think you articulated very well the same sentiment we're getting from the parents of these students. And understand there's only so much within our control, but whatever we can do to improve communications there, I think will go a long way to help rebuilding that trust. And then one last question, Heather, I think in your slide you talked about our compliance improvements. And obviously, for the board, as we see these complaints in closed session, we have noticed that it is trending in the right direction. We just want to get a better sense of, I guess, what was causing the prior spike and how we can try to get that number as close to zero as possible in terms of internal processes, staffing? What do we need to do to see improvements further in terms of that compliance issue that we've been having?
So it's multifaceted. I would say that most of the complaints that come through our private school responsibilities. Basically, any student who lives in our boundaries of San Mateo-Foster City, whether they attend our schools or not, we're responsible for their special education needs. So there's a variety of things that can happen. Sometimes parents privately place at the beginning of a child's educational experience. Other times they may take their kids out of our schools because they feel like they're not getting what they need. And there's compliance connected to that. And so we're responsible for certain things. In some cases, maintaining that compliance gets more complicated with making sure that, deadlines are met. Everything within special education has legal deadlines connected. And so what we've improved is making sure that things aren't falling through the cracks, that annual meetings are being held on time, triennial evaluations are being held, that requests are being responded to. So for example, I can just think of one off the top of my head. About 4 years ago, we had a middle school student who never showed up. First day of school, they never showed up. And it was a sixth grader, and the office was like, oh, I guess they're just not coming. And the family called and said, we're not coming. Well, we didn't know at the time that student had an IEP. And since the school didn't just drop them because they figured they weren't coming to school, then our department wasn't notified that there was a student with an IEP that wasn't going to school. And so they didn't follow up with the annual meeting for that student. So that created a liability on our side, which then later on, they sought reimbursement for some services because we had missed that deadline. And when we have that kind of, it could sometimes be a very small liability, but in the state of California, the Office of Administrative Hearings, they basically, the burden of proof really lies with the districts, and the preference goes towards family. So if there's anything, even the smallest mistake or hole in a case, then our liability could basically make us vulnerable to having to pay some sort of compensation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on this item? Take a deep breath.
I need to, no,
Come
not
on.
today.
Okay, next time. Put you on the list. Any comments from Zoom?
We had one earlier raised hand, but it's no longer raised.
Next time. Yeah. Okay, back to us for board comments. Come back.
I just wanted to ask for a 5-minute break after this.
We only have one item left, but okay. Any comments on this item for right now? Okay, well, I'll just thank you, Heather, for this information. Like I said before, I really want to be supportive of SMETA's desire to be part of the conversation, to be asked how things are going, to focus on professional development that is applicable and that they feel is needed for their for what they're doing, and to just provide them the support they need. So I think this is an area where we can dive a little deeper and see where we can help meet those wishes and hopes that they're looking for this year. So just would encourage gathering some more feedback from them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, moving. Oh, you want a break? 5-minute break. 5 minutes. Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, we're gonna wrap this up soon, so let's go to item 8B, approval of resolution 04-24-25.
I heard about it last
Oh, there is? Oh, yeah, you're right, sorry. There's one comprehensive, okay. 8A, sorry. Initial discussion of community access to school district facilities and fields.
Thank you, President Proctor. This item was brought forward as a request of the board to agendize this for discussion. I've attached two documents to the board agenda for the purposes of the board to be able to have this conversation. The first is our board policy that governs our facilities access and facilities use. So if we go first to that document, the policy itself names and cites the Civic Center Act, and ultimately, I think what is really positive about our starting point for our policy is that it's very straightforward about the intent, and I think maybe a lot of the how is not spelled out, but for me, just my read on it, the big picture is wanting to not only assist, or as they call it, aid, but encourage as well groups desiring to use facilities for approved activities. So what this board might choose to also discuss is how we open our facilities themselves for these approved activities when it is not a formal group, when it is more unassociated or unaffiliated community use. I think about Burrell Middle School. We have some folks who they just go run around our track. One of them has the sweetest dog you've ever seen. I want to meet the dog one day, but they go out and they just run on campus. But they do it after the kids practice soccer, and it's sort of like, it's part of that community access that we see. But I think we have some interest in the community to see that at more campuses. So the second document that you have, Joe, if you can pull this up, this is a toolkit for school districts that want to open their school grounds for the community after hours. And it's a very lengthy document. My sort of opening suggestion to the board is that you take best practices like toolkits like this, and you consider finding local school districts in our region that have policies that facilitate community access, and you go on a fact-finding mission. And from there, you decide on a process for how you bring this conversation to, to a representative group of the community. Bless you. But I wanted to put these in the public space so that the members of the board tonight could begin the discussion on really where you sit with these school facilities and the school facilities access question, acknowledging that there are some who believe, don't let anybody on our campus because I want it clean and ready for my child tomorrow, and allowing others on campus represents a risk. And there are others who feel we're all part of this community. The kid you're keeping out is your own student who might want to go run on the field with their brothers and sisters and with their parents. And so you're really limiting that opportunity for, for the physiological community development as a result of having policies and practices that are too restrictive. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. I wanted to put these two documents before the board and initiate a discussion among the board of what steps you might direct the school district administration to take in going deeper into this topic. So with that, I'll pass it back to the board.
Thank you. Are there any clarifying questions on this item before we go to discussion? Okay, are there any public comments from this audience? How about Zoom?
Checking Zoom. No public comments on Zoom.
Okay, we can go to board discussion on this item. I just wanted to start one thing. I opened up this joint use toolkit and just started at the very introduction. I feel like starting with saying that people are overweight and obese is not really our goal here. So if we're going to follow this toolkit, I'd like to not start with that and maybe find another purpose for why we want kids to come on campus if that's the decision. So go ahead and do the rest of the discussion, but I wanted to point that out before we went that direction.
I was actually going to bring up that very thing. So I think we can take what we need from this document and leave the rest. Because I do, one of the things that kind of prompted this was we talked a little bit last year about facilities use or renting out to community groups, but then also having these spaces open for the nearby residents or neighbors to use. I just think, exercise and, physical activity is just, really fun. And we want to have kids have healthy ways to enjoy themselves and hang out with friends and develop community and, develop bonds with the people that they know, maybe form new bonds with people that they might meet at these schools. And just, to go a little bit deeper on this, it's a little bit tangential, but this issue of, focusing on the use of these facilities just as a tool to counter, quote unquote, counter rising rates of obesity and related diseases. I just want to point out that there's so much research that we cannot disentangle the harmful effects of obesity from fat phobia and how negative ideas about fat people affect kids, especially kids who are in our elementary schools, who are in our middle schools, and obviously all the way through high school. So that's another reason why I really want to disentangle those things. And if anyone wants to read more, there's this great book called Fat Talk, and it's about parenting in the age of diet culture by Virginia Solsmith. So, and then, yeah, I just, I think these facilities, and they're so beautiful and wonderful, they were paid for with community funds. And, I think it's also a way to really build goodwill with the neighbors and, like Superintendent Ochoa said, that we're all one community and it belongs to all of us. And I would just, I know in, for example, my neighborhood, there's a lot of families that I haven't met because they don't send their kids to the local school. And I just feel like there's so many ways in which we all go in our own orbit and we never talk to anyone who's not in our daily path. And so I think I know it's a little bit, it's a little bit more, it's not really a concrete outcome, but just I think it is a way of bringing people together and getting people to know each other more. So I really support opening up as much as we can, especially, maybe we focus on a group of schools and then expand from there, and maybe looking at areas with the most need first, and then, we don't have to do it all at once, but thank you for bringing this to us, and I look forward to more discussion on this.
I just want to echo the superintendent's point about trying to take best practices from our neighboring districts or even our high school district. I was actually at a parent gathering just this past weekend where this particular topic was a hot topic of discussion, and they were comparing it to neighboring districts, maybe the high school district where they had automatic time locks and other ways for the community to gain access, but to address some of the general concerns about noise complaints or safety or some of the other issues. Not that any of those solutions are perfect, but I think to Trustee Trin's point, there are certain sites that I think with our communities that would benefit more than others, where there aren't as many parks or fields available. And then to the broader point, even the parents that were meeting this past weekend mentioned, we paid for these fields. And yes, they're for the students, but if there's a new track, if there are new basketball courts, if there are other spaces that we can use publicly, allowing the community to access to spaces benefits our students, benefits their families. And also when we go back to the community to then talk about our next round of updates, shows that this is a universal benefit that we're offering. At the same time, I do hear the complaints about noise, trespassing, vandalism, other issues as well. So to the extent that we can be thoughtful about how we roll it out, maybe choose a few select sites, work closely with community partners and others, I do think there's a ton of opportunity here. I'm very supportive about exploring this further.
Yeah, I'm into this. I do want us to open up our campuses, as soon as possible in a way that makes sense. I think I spoke at Bowditch the other day about just school pride. I think being able to go to your school on the weekends. I mean, I learned how to ride my bike, a two-wheel bike at my elementary school. My brothers and sister and I used to, run all over the playground, and it just feels like free time. There's nobody other than your parents, telling you what you can and can't do. Obviously, we want everyone to be respectful of our facilities, but I think that being able to get into your school on the weekend just will make kids feel more connected to their school. Obviously, the community as well, that there may be people that don't go to the school that start to use our facilities, but it just makes our schools more of a community hub than just a Monday through Friday kind of place that you go to and learn and leave. So I'm into this. I would be really supportive of this. I do wonder if there's, things we need to do to implement, like adding more garbage cans and recycle bins and things, just so people will feel when they leave, they don't leave it a mess. But otherwise, I think this is a great opportunity for our school district to just partner up with the community. Anything else on this? Okay, sounds like you have some ideas of how we're all feeling. Okay, then we can move on to item 8B, approval of resolution 07-2425 in support of proposition 2.
Thank you, President Proctor. This is a resolution that you and I both wanted to add to this agenda item at others meetings. When we have a resolution, the board does read the resolution as a group. So I want to certainly give the board the access to be able to do so with this resolution. I would say that when statewide bond measures are up for approval and for discussion, I think, this being something that would directly affect our district with potential bond reimbursement funds coming back to the district in the tens of millions. I think we have 56 million in eligibility. We have a lot of reasons to really pull for this. And so that's what this resolution does, is it adds to the long list of school districts that are passing resolutions like this that will be shared with, with the community in events like this and school board meetings throughout the state. So that's where this comes from. Certainly across our organizations through CSBA, through CASBO, through the Association of California School Administrators, and the many groups that have lobbied for this proposition. My recommendation to the board is to approve this resolution.
Are there any questions on this? Clarifying questions? Any public comment on this item? Anyone on Zoom?
No comments on Zoom.
Okay, do you guys want to read? Shall we read? Do you have it pulled up? Go for it.
Proposition 2, kindergarten through grade 12 schools and local community college public education facilities, modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024. Whereas the California Constitution finds public education is a state responsibility in Article, is that 9? Section 5, and
Whereas the state is out of school facility program funds and cannot provide the state match for almost $3.5 billion in projects that qualify for state aid. And
Whereas the San Mateo Foster City School District has over $900 million in facility needs, which state bonds may partially fund, and
Whereas Proposition 2, the kindergarten through grade 12 schools and local community college public education facilities modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024 provides for the renovation of aging schools, upgrade of existing classrooms, construction of new classrooms to accommodate growth, career technical education facilities to provide job training to meet the workforce needs of California employers, testing and remediation of lead levels in water at school sites, disaster assistance, replacement of 75-year-old buildings, adding essential facilities like libraries and multi-purpose rooms, mitigating the effects of higher average temperatures, and assistance for small and low-wealth school districts, and
Whereas school districts need state financial support to implement new mandates and incentives such as universal transitional kindergarten, expanded learning, on-site cooking, and meal preparation. Later secondary school start time and solar power generation and storage. And
Whereas quality 21st century school facilities designed for today's and tomorrow's students enhance academic achievement and further the state's academic goals. And
whereas the California unemployment rate is greater than the national unemployment rate, and 13,000.
okay. Whereas 13,000 middle-class jobs are created for each $1 billion in school facility infrastructure investment, and
whereas these jobs will be created throughout California and will include almost all building trades. And
whereas the local control funding formula provides funding for educational services for all students, but does not provide dedicated facilities funding. And
Whereas Proposition 2, the kindergarten through grade 12 schools and local community college public education facilities modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024 will not raise state taxes, and
whereas Proposition 2, the kindergarten through grade 12 schools and local community college public education facilities modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024 enhances public accountability and transparency for the use of its proceeds.
I lost my place.
Last whereas.
Oh, the last. Proposition 2 and kindergarten through 12th grade school and local community college public education facility modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024. State matching funds will reduce the need for additional local property taxes for school facilities.
now, therefore, be it resolved that the San Mateo Foster City School District supports Proposition 2, the kindergarten through grade 12 schools and local community college public education facilities modernization, repair, and safety bond act of 2024.
all right, great reading. You got the longest paragraph, so really appreciate what you've done for us tonight. Okay, are there any other comments from the board, or I'm ready for a motion if anyone wants to jump to that, but
Make a motion to pass.
okay, thank you, Trustee Brooks for the motion and Trustee Kim for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4 yeses. Thank you. Okay, we're going to item 9, board member statements and requests for future agenda items.
Actually, sorry, just a quick comment. On the resolution itself, can we fix that one thing that we saw where the whereas wasn't spaced out correctly? I believe it was the 3, 4, 5. The 6th whereas clause. That needs to be bolded and separated.
Are there any board member statements and requests for future agenda items, or else I'm moving on?
Just can I get a quick update on the digital safety? I know Governor Newsom just signed something into law that is like very sweeping, and Superintendent Ochoa is, guest du jour at KQED. So I'd just love to hear more about that. Thank you.
I will just, thank the people that showed up tonight. Thank you to the SMETA members that were here. Just really appreciate having live people in the audience. If there's no other comments, the future meeting dates are listed. Our next meeting is a study session on October 3rd for extended learning. And we will go on to item 11, public comments on closed session items. Are there any public comments in the room? Any public comments on Zoom?
No public comments on Zoom.
Okay, we're going to recess to closed session. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're returning from closed session. I don't know what the item number was. Hold on. Okay, we're reconvening to open session, item 13A, with a report out. So let me get these in right order. Okay, item number 12C. The board unanimously voted to approve a compromise agreement in Office of Administrative Hearings, case number 2024070945, to resolve claims against the district in exchange for a total not to exceed $15,000 in funding for students' 2023-2024 educational expenses. It was unanimous. Okay, item number 12B. I didn't do that in order, sorry. 12B. The board unanimously voted to approve a compromise agreement in Office of Administrative Hearings, case 2024070267, to resolve claims against the district in exchange for a total not to exceed $23,750 in funding compensatory education and related attorney's fees. That was also unanimous. And item 12E, the board unanimously voted to approve a compromise agreement in Office of Administrative Hearings, case number 2024070434, to resolve claims against the district in exchange for a total not to exceed $20,500 in funding compensatory education and related attorney's fees. That was also unanimous. So now we can go to item 14A, which is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Kim, for the motion and Trustee Brooks for the second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, good night, everyone. The meeting is adjourned at 9:48 p.m. 9:48. Thank you.